All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Q4 Adaptation and Resilience Working Group meeting. I'm Josh Kurtz. I'm the Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources. It's great to see those in the room and those on the phone today. Just some quick housekeeping before we jump in. And as a reminder, we do record these meetings for the purpose of note-taking. I'm going to start by calling roll, and then we'll walk through, we'll approve the minutes, and then we'll walk through the agenda briefly. So I'll start with Delegate Stein.
Here.
Eric Myers. Bob Allen. Yeah. Frederica Moser.
Here.
Randy Espinola. You see Brandy? All right.
I'm here. Sorry.
No problem. Matt Rowe. And Harrison Drang is here. Sarah Bender.
I'm here.
Great. Tom Parham.
Hey, good afternoon.
Cliff Mitchell. Debbie Hare Cornwell.
Here.
Nadia Shahab.
I'm here.
Allison is still here. Yep. Catherine McCall.
Here.
Jenny Osa. John Papavasalou. And Joy Hatchett. Seems like we still have a quorum. Great. All right, next we will approve the meeting minutes. Would anybody like to edit, amend, change the minutes? If you have a chance to look through. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Frederica Mosier.
Thank you, Frederica. A second?
Second.
Second from Ann. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand online.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any opposed? All right, the meeting minutes are approved. All right, so today we'll start with our standing Office of Resilience update. We've got a presentation on the Hughes Center Climate Smart Agricultural Report, which I'm very much looking forward to. And then we're going to talk about the next gen work and then get into the work plan discussion for AirWG for this coming year. We'll have our standard public comment and we'll wrap with next steps, including talking through the meeting schedule for next year. So we've got a lot to cover today. So with that, I think we will start right off the bat with any update from the Office of Resilience.
Thanks so much, Secretary Kurtz. This is Summer Modelfino speaking, Deputy Chief Resilience Officer in the Office of Resilience. We also have Mike Hinson online, but I think he is joining by phone, so he'll chime in probably at some point, but I'll give the update. And I'm going to go ahead and briefly, I'm going to share a couple of slides just to show people a little bit more of what I'm talking about with this update, but we wanted to share just kind of a status update with this group on where we are with the state resilience strategy. So with that in mind, really quick reminder on what this is, and apologies in advance to everyone who's heard this numerous times already, but the statewide resilience strategy has been a big effort that our office has been working on. It came out of legislation as well as executive order with the intent to accomplish the goals that you see on this slide. So establishing a shared picture of hazards and stressors across the state, crosswalking existing plans and programs, of which we know there are many, many that have also been really shepherded by this group, aligning on some high-level goals and prioritization criteria. And then really the heart of it is proposing and prioritizing state level actions for key sectors. And some keywords there would be the state level side of things and also key sectors. We know that there's a lot of things we could do on resilience and trying to kind of break it down. And then finally, developing a framework for place-based resilience, understanding how we can coordinate better when there might be multiple agencies that are working in the same place to make it kind of more transformative and a better experience for the locals. So with that, just a quick reminder on the sectors and focus areas for the strategy. For the sectors, we've got everything you see on the slide: housing, environment and natural systems, community and local government capacity, food systems, and critical infrastructure. We had work groups that were centered on these sectors, and actually many folks from the ARWG participated in some way, shape, or form, which we're really grateful for. And then also kind of embedded throughout the strategy are these focus areas you see in the red. So place-based resilience, which I mentioned, justice and equity, which we know is really important across all of our work. And then also considering the economic and job creation side of things. A little bit more on kind of the reminder of what this is, and then I promise I'll share the updates. But in terms of what this will look like, it'll be a combination of summarizing what already exists, which is hopefully a helpful task in and of itself, just given the sheer amount going on. The recommendations, which will be 2, 5, and 10-year recommendations. The 2-year recommendations, more often than not, are kind of capturing the in-progress work, and the 5 and 10-year recommendations bring a lot more kind of ambitious goals to the table for things we know we want to address. And then finally, and this really kind of happened organically, we also are including what we're calling big ideas and open questions. That means, you know, there are topics we know are coming up a lot. We don't necessarily know what the recommendation is, but we know that additional focus and attention and coordination from state agencies is needed to identify some of those recommendations going forward. All right, so a little bit on the timeline here, and you'll see it kind of gets a little bit vague toward the end, but as I mentioned, we held sector-specific work groups at the beginning of the year. Thank you for everyone that was a part of those. Also interviewed experts one-on-one, and another thank you for that. And then kind of over the summer and up until where we are now, we have been finalizing the goals and recommendations, working with state agencies on a one-on-one and kind of topically grouped basis. We've drafted the full strategy. We just wrapped up a comment period where agencies weighed in on the full strategy draft. And now we're kind of in the design and finalization process with the intent to launch the strategy early next calendar year, you know, assuming that things kind of go relatively smoothly, but that's where we are right now. So feeling really good about our trajectory and really appreciative of everyone who's weighed in at the various points. One thing I did want to quickly highlight is what our partner engagement has looked like. We've engaged around 120 partners, which again, that's either a large number or a small number, depending on how you look at it, but we're really proud of kind of the diversity of partners that we were able to bring to the table. As I mentioned, we took a cross-sector approach, so we really made sure to capture experts from all 5 of the sectors that I mentioned before through the work groups. And then we also followed up with individuals to have interviews, especially if folks had a really specific role or expertise where we knew it would be difficult to kind of get the full breadth of their understanding in a group setting. It was important to us to make sure we were representing all regions of the state in the strategy so that we could capture the really diverse types of needs that we hear about in our different regions. And also wanted to make sure that we captured folks from government, nonprofit, private sector, universities, and so on and so forth. And so we're really excited about this and hope that the partnerships we've built through this process can really carry through and make it a strong implementation phase. Okay, a couple highlights. And these are probably going to become a little bit out of date as we're finalizing things. But we're at 19 goals, 47 recommendations. There may be 1 or 2 recommendations that get added at the last minute as we're really wrapping up this last bit of feedback from state agencies. So those numbers just kind of give you order of magnitude, but as with everything, don't hold us to it completely. Each recommendation has an owner, so an agency or state entity that is responsible and is aware of that and has weighed in on the language and the intent, is tagged to a 2, 5, or 10-year timeline and provides some sort of notes on budget or cost. As you get into the 10-year recommendations, of course, that becomes a lot more vague, you know, and in some cases, it's not really possible to completely cost something out, but we wanted to at least go through the exercise of having that discussion for each recommendation with an understanding that that'll become more concrete as we get into implementing. For each recommendation, it was important to us to also be really clear about why this matters. So each recommendation will have a write-up of that. And that might sound, you know, pretty obvious, but when you think about some of the more maybe technical steps that are happening within agencies that have a really big impact that might not be immediately obvious, we're hoping this can help tell the story and explain how all of these different recommendations fit together. We're still figuring some things out to make sure we're doing a good job telling the story in the most effective way possible about how each of these recommendations addresses the focus areas and hazards that we know are of concern across Maryland. So we'll be figuring that out in short order as we're finalizing things, but share all that to say that we're really cognizant of wanting to make sure that this is readable and understandable to the folks that are going to be picking up this strategy that may not have been as involved in the process. And then a couple themes we wanted to share because we, since we're still finalizing, we can't get too deep into the details, but wanted to make sure to share some highlights with this group. One, I don't think will be a surprise because I know this group has talked about it quite a lot, but I think one thing we heard over and over was the importance of state coordination around resilience funding, especially at a time where federal resources are in flux or decreasing. Just understanding that we can do more with the dollars we have if we're really being purposeful about coordination. There was also a lot of great conversation about a whole of government approach and ways of institutionalizing resilience, whether across a range of funding programs or across regulations. So that is a theme that you will definitely see reflected throughout in recommendations, as well as some of the big ideas and things to consider going forward. Another theme I want to mention, and this is also one of the sectors, but it was important to us to focus on housing in this strategy, just given the priority that housing is for Marylanders and for Governor Moore and all of us working in state government, but also because when we crosswalked existing state resilience plans, we noticed that housing wasn't always at the forefront. So we thought this could be a good opportunity to fill in some gaps and really share what we're already doing and where the thinking might go in the future. Not going to be a surprise to this group. A lot of discussion about local technical assistance and the support that's needed, in particular to support project pre-development in order to be able to actually take action. And then finally, and I know this is one we've talked a lot about with this group and with DNR, but also being thoughtful and purposeful about coordination around extreme heat in a similar way to what we see happening with flood already. And I think that might, oh no, I have one tiny last thing in my update and then I'll probably be at time here. But in terms of what's next, obviously the first things first, we have to finish and launch the strategy. Then we'll be getting into implementing it. And obviously that's kind of where the devil is in the details. And our office will be providing support to agencies to help them understand if they have additional needs to accomplish some of the short-term recommendations. Our office will be utilizing agency resilience liaison meetings to cover key topics that have been surfaced through the strategy process and through other coordinating mechanisms. And then, of course, we'll have to do and want to do report outs on the strategy, which we're going to make as painless as possible for our state agency partners, but making sure that 2 times a year, in harmony with the reporting that folks are already doing, we're sharing what some of our wins are and also, identifying in real time if there are any places where we don't think we're going to be able to meet the goals that we've set. And then the last thing, which has some question marks around it still, is the update cycle for the strategy. Obviously, this isn't a one and done type of document. Hopefully the first time we do it is the most difficult time we do it and it gets easier, but we'll also be working with folks on what the update frequency and process will look like for this strategy going forward. And that is it from me. I'm probably out of time here, but if anyone does have questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly and happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Great. Thank you very much, Summer. Appreciate all the detail and all the work that's gone into the strategy. And I think obviously we'll want to stay very tight with you all as we're developing the work plan for the Adaptation Resilience Work Group. So very much appreciate the opportunity to comment on the plan. Or the strategy, apologies. So, excellent. All right, well, next we will move on to the presentation on the Harry Hughes Center's Climate Smart Agricultural Report. And I'm excited to introduce Ernie Shea, who's the president of Solutions from the Land, a nonprofit organization that incubates and supports farmer-led, multi-stakeholder platforms that inspire, educate, and equip agricultural partners to innovate and lead efforts to sustain productivity, enhance climate resilience, and contribute to local and global goals for sustainable development. President Shea has over 40 years of experience at the global, national, state, and local level, and positions held include the Assistant Secretary for the Maryland Department of Agriculture, the CEO of the National Association of Conservation Districts, and serving as a current board member for the Harry Hughes Center for Agroecology. President Shea, I will turn it over to you for the presentation, and thank you very much for being here today.
Okay, Secretary Kurtz, thank you very much for that kind introduction and warm welcome. It's great to be with you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Well, today we want to do a couple of things, just a quick reintroduction of the Hughes Agroecology Center for those that aren't familiar with us, and then want to give you a preview of the Climate Smart Agriculture Roadmap to Resilience report that's going to be released mid-January. So you're getting the sneak preview. In fact, I think this is our premier first unveiling of this comprehensive report. So for those of you that are not familiar with the Hughes Center for Agroecology, it was founded back in 1999 by former Governor Harry Hughes, who really saw a positive connection between agriculture and the environment and saw a need to create a bridge, a platform where stakeholders involved with agriculture, Chesapeake Bay cleanup effort, and environmental quality more broadly could work together to promote practical, pragmatic approaches to coming up with win-wins that benefit Maryland agriculture and the environment. The next slide shows you our focus areas, and we thought we concentrate on three primary areas. Research that is funded with state appropriations every year, as well as other dollars that we're able to bring in to match. And we address issues that are challenging for agriculture today. So whether that's water quality issues, carbon sequestration and storage, saltwater intrusion, there's a wide variety of issues that we invest research dollars in to come up with solutions that farmers and watermen can use and implement. We also do quite a bit of work with policy analysis, where we take a look at issues that are before the state legislature, and when asked for guidance, we bring our academic NGO brain trust together around this and offer up recommendations. And examples of reports we've released in recent years are the Maryland Forest Technical Study that many of you participated in, our Chesapeake Food Shed Assessment Report, and the report, the roadmap we're going to be talking about today, our Climate Smart Agriculture Report. We also do a lot of outreach. We are a public-facing 501c3 not-for-profit, and we work hard at listening to our primary clients and constituents to understand their needs, and then we bring those needs back in, discuss them, and talk about how we can provide support and assistance. We also disseminate information out to farmers and other land managers that hopefully enables them to do a better job of managing the resource base to come up with not just improved food security and nutrition benefits, but concurrently the delivery of ecosystem services, the ways these agricultural landscapes can be managed to enhance biodiversity, sequester carbon, filter and store water are just a couple of examples of the multidimensional benefits that come out of well-managed land. So we're located over at the Y Research Center, University of Maryland on the Eastern Shore, and Nancy Nunn, our acting executive director, is on the line with me today along with Josh Bollinger. So whatever I don't get right or miss, they'll I'm sure correct me and help fill in the gaps. So let me turn now to the Maryland Climate Smart Agriculture Roadmap to Resilience Action Plan. This has been a 5-year exercise, and it was one that we proceeded slowly, deliberately, and very intentionally. We're very inclusive to bring all of the stakeholders, especially farmers, forest landowners that manage land, into this conversation so that we are developing recommendations and outcomes that are grounded in reality. The project has two primary components that we'll talk a little bit more about as I go through the report. The first is that we had a research component of the project that really took a look at where our academic experts were seeing the impacts of climate change today going forward and what might be done to help address some of the challenges. And then we also had what turned out to be the biggest part of the program, a very intentional outreach and series of listening sessions and information gathering exercises where we listened to the people that are on the land and to get an understanding of what they're facing, what they need. I think the overarching message here at the very beginning is that we heard very clearly that climate change is real. Climate change is happening today. Climate change is impacting Maryland agriculture, and climate change is a major threat multiplier to one of the state's largest economic engines, if you will. And as such, it requires everyone's attention. Next slide, if you could. So the process started with a grant back in 2001 from the state legislature to help design how we would put this together. And I see Delegate Stein is on the meeting Zoom today and was one of the leaders that helped elevate this as a priority and secure that the funding was made available. We then designed a process to conduct this study and develop recommendations. And in the 2022 legislative session, received funding to actually carry it out. We designed this in what I think is a very novel way. We wanted this to be bottom up, not top down. So we created a project leadership team composed of farmers, forest landowners, conservation partners, academic partners, government agency partners. And we said to them, this is going to be your project. The Hughes Center for Agroecology is the facilitating table that we're gathering around, but we're going to co-create this body of work and we're going to do it together. And we use that as our North Star guiding principles. We went through it. Another critical part of the process was, as I mentioned earlier, the extensive outreach that we did with the farming community. And this took place over a several-year period of time where we went to the communities that are affected, held listening sessions, had focus group meetings, gathered up information, and we talked to both individuals and organizations. So we were getting a very diverse collection of input that came into us. And then we were also informed by the research project that our academic partners did. Next slide. I think the next one, yeah, this is the members of the project leadership team. And I want to give a special shout out to our MDA partners, Hans Schmidt, Nadia Chiab, and Natalie Schneider, who served on it from Maryland Department of Natural Resources. We had Ryland Taylor, who I think is in the room today, and Christine Kahn, who is now retired. Rachel Lamb from the Department of the Environment was a very active participant. And these are some of the folks that worked with us over these past several years to put the report together. Next slide, Josh. So people may ask, what is climate smart agriculture? And you've been reading how the current administration in Washington is walking away from any references to climate change, but also climate smart agriculture. And it's very unfortunate because this is a term that has been well accepted by the agricultural community across the country and across the world. And what's unique about it is that it starts the conversation not with what the problem is of climate change and impacts on the planet at large, but it starts around how is it affecting agriculture? How is it affecting farmers, people on the land? And there are three concentric entry points for this conversation, and we call them pillars. The first pillar is a focused discussion around how can we sustainably intensify production of both agricultural commodities and ecosystem services, given the climate impacts. And this is what gets farmers most interested and excited, because it's about them and their operations and how they can be sustainable and economically viable going forward for future generations. The second pillar in a climate smart agriculture body of work is adaptation and resilience efforts. And I just heard the program presentation on your resilience work, which fits hand in glove with what we've come up with. Climate change is impacting Maryland agriculture, and farmers need to be adapting and becoming more resilient. So that's the second discussion point. And the good news is that when you talk with them about sustainable production systems, systems that are more resilient, the good news co-benefit is that they are delivering a climate mitigation solution. They're sequestering carbon in the ground. They're producing biomass feedstocks that can be converted into renewable forms of energy or bioproducts that displace fossil fuels. So you start the conversation with those three main elements. We don't start the conversation with carbon pollution, because that is an immediate red flag that builds walls up around farm community, because what they hear is, people don't like how I'm farming. I must be doing something wrong. I'm a polluter. I'm a problem. And they go into retreat and they're not engaged. So we found this framing, this approach, to be welcoming, to be trust building with the farm community, and they have bought in as we've worked over the last couple of years. Next slide. What is the impact on Maryland agriculture? More heat, more drought, more intense rain events. Our report will lay out what our science partners told us. The next slide has a few more examples of indicators. It's not just one extreme or the other, it's both. And sometimes in a very short period of time, moving from one set of conditions to another. And anytime you experience these types of extreme weather events or extreme shifts in temperature, it's very, very disruptive to life systems, to the biological processes of plant growth, animal growth, and it has an impact. And saltwater intrusion is yet another example that we found to be a growing problem in Maryland that is likely going to get worse as climate change continues to develop. Next slide. The producers, we started with the question. We had two questions, actually. We said, what are you experiencing? And what do you need? And those two framing questions were the foundation of every conversation we had with them. And what they're experiencing is this first slide, or what they're seeing, what they're feeling today. They're confirming the classic impacts of climate change in an agricultural landscape. And this is their words, not ours. This wasn't the scientists going out and telling them that this is what's going to be happening. This was us asking them, what are you experiencing today? And these are examples that you'll see in the full report. We then asked them, what do they need? And that's our next slide. And that took us into just a plethora of ideas and recommendations that were identified by the farmers. And they said, this is where we need help. And we took all of this material and built it into the recommendations that are contained in the report. Next slide, Josh. So the report has 13 recommendations. I'm not going to take the time to go through all of them now. We will certainly send you an embargoed copy of the report so you have a chance to see it, digest it. But these 13 kind of were pulled out of all of the input that we received from the ground up. And the capstone message is to really embrace and adopt a climate smart agriculture and agroforestry approach to addressing climate change. There's been a lot of great work that the state of Maryland has done that we are seeing ourselves as an opportunity to build upon. The farming community has been hearing a lot about carbon pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. And while they're part of that, what this report attempts to do is to advance pathways to sustainability, pathways to resilience as equal pillars in that 3 climate smart agriculture pillar framework that we talked about. There is a section of recommendations here that talk about the need for evaluating and supporting more adaptive management practices. We spent quite a bit of time with our state government partners talking about the importance of integrating climate change action plans with other forms of climate response strategies so that we have a integrated approach. And I think one of the examples you'll see in this report is that we've had a big conversation about renewable energy development as a climate solution pathway and the upside of that, but also the downside of that. And when you're managing in a less than optimal integrated way, sometimes you have unintended consequences. So the push to expand renewable energy development has had some unintended consequences on the loss of productive agricultural land. And you've been hearing a lot about that, I'm sure, and we did as well. So tying these pieces together and thinking about these agricultural landscapes as solution platforms for many things, and that requires this integrated approach. And as we had this conversation with the Department of State Planning, there was a clear recognition of this and a validation of our observation and an appreciation for drawing this recommendation out. I won't have time to get through all of these, but we heard a lot about the need for investments in early warning systems, where thanks to new technologies, we have a much better job, a chance of anticipating what's coming, whether it's heat, water, drought, and getting that information in front of farmers so they can make more real-time management decisions to adapt and become more resilient in the face of these impacts that are coming. There was a recognition that we can be much more efficient in delivering solutions. So we have in this report a recommendation, create a one-stop shop where producers can come together and exchange information with multiple support partners that will be helping farmers be more sustainable. And maybe just, Josh, go to the next slide. I think there's examples of other recommendations in here. Again, I won't try to get through all these right now, but each of our recommendations has a target audience that we're suggesting takes the lead in terms of carrying this forward. So we've tried to write it with the help of our state government partners to be very much in alignment with what I just saw with the previous presentation about who's going to own these recommendations, whose point, whose lead. So we're really appreciative of the input the state government provided, but most importantly, we're appreciative and proud of the trust that we earned from the way we did this project from the farming public itself, where they came forward and said they're ready to do their part and here's the help that they need. So maybe just closing out, a couple of comments about who's going to do the work and how do we bring it forward. The short answer here is this is all of the above. Climate change is so cross-cutting that it's going to take multiple partners working together in a public-private partnership, if you will, to bring about the outcomes that we're seeking. So our report lays out suggested responsibilities for all of these players, some of which we've got listed on this screen today. The last slide I think we have is the outcomes and where do we go from here. So when we released this report in mid-January, I believe the tentative date that we're looking at is January 15th. Secretary Addix is working with other cabinet secretaries and the governor's office to come up with a great launching platform for the release of the report, where we will have a cross-section of the players that help develop it there to share the outcomes and lend their voice to why this is important. And we'll be talking about the data that has come out of the work, the tools that we've identified, the important process of this co-creation where we've done this together, and our recommendations. So we are we are closing out by saying this is not a report that was produced. This is a movement that we've created. And maybe, Josh, that's my last slide. I've forgotten exactly where we are in our slide deck. But this is a coalition effort. This is beyond all of government. This is public-private sector working together to help agriculture be more resilient, be more sustainable, and concurrently be revalued for delivering multiple ecosystem services. So I had the good fortune and pleasure of co-chairing this body of work. The project leadership team worked so hard. This was not an easy process, as you might imagine, working over multiple years, listening to lots of folks, distilling it down, creating the report, and building a movement to help carry it forward. So we're excited about the opportunity to launch this in January and look forward to working with you in the implementation phase. So I'll stop there, Secretary Kurtz, and see if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Ernie. Much appreciated. I think, having watched this play out over the past couple of years, I've just really appreciate and was impressed with the level of due diligence and the number of partners, individuals that were reached by this effort. And I think we'll make it a really robust report when we're able to read the whole thing. So thank you to you. Thank you to everybody who participated in this, the creation of the report. We did get a question in the chat about whether the launch will be public and able to append either in person or online. Do you know yet whether that will be a public launch?
Well, that's our goal. Secretary Addix has been talking with the governor's office. We would be so honored if the governor saw this as a priority and had an opportunity to join with us. But I think at a minimum, we're talking about a public event with our cabinet secretaries that have been involved with this over the last couple of years, our academic partners, and our farmer leaders that help put it together. So we are right now securing statements of support, letters of commitment, validation statements that will be coming from the agricultural community, signaling their support and endorsement of this work. So representatives of those actors will be there to be part of the presentation team as well. So we're hopeful that it comes across not as a top-down government project and report, but a co-created set of actionable items that we have a very diverse group of people ready to lend their shoulder to do the good work.
Great, thank you, Ray. All right, well, I'll open it up to other questions. If you're online, please use the raise hand function. If you're in the room, old school hand raise would be great. So with that, any questions? Yeah, Frederica.
Great. Thank you, President Shea. That was just a tremendous effort, and that was a great talk. I was so glad to hear all about that, but I felt listening to it all that I would have liked to hear where we think the federal government, USDA, Soil Conservation Corps, and others who are very closely connected with the farming community, how are they going to be engaged and get buy-in on this plan? Thank you very much.
Well, it's a great question, and our whole support system is one of federal, state, local collaboration with private sector involvement, and we're in a different era. We're in an era where the federal government has identified different priorities and is working to address those priorities. We are not in alignment on the conversation around climate change. We intentionally chose to name our roadmap climate smart agriculture, whereas USDA is literally erasing that terminology from any documents and websites. But the farming community is comfortable with that terminology, with climate smart ag. So we're going to continue to welcome them to the table. They have resources that are critically important, particularly conservation programming, crop insurance programming, animal health programs that we need if we're going to address this growing major challenge to Maryland agriculture. So if we have to use different words and dance a little bit differently to still secure a partnership, we're certainly prepared to do that. but Maryland is not alone. My organization, Solutions from the Land, has helped develop over a dozen climate smart agriculture state level reports across the country. And I'm not hearing farmers run away from the pragmatic solutions that I think we've embraced in our report.
Thank you.
So you mentioned a one-stop shop that the farmers really need. We have lots of programs all over the place, and the farmers need a way to find them and access them. Do we have a sense of where the one-stop shop might be balanced?
Yeah, I think we've identified the need more than the actual solution. So there's a way to work smarter and more efficiently, drawing together the multiple partners that touch and assist agriculture. What they're looking for is a way, again, it gets back to integrating and collaborating, using data, using information, using tools more effectively. So we'll be working with Secretary Addix over the coming months to kind of build that out a little bit more completely. We've got strong local footprints in soil and water conservation districts around the country. We've got extension agents delivered around the state. I should have said instead of country. And these are all candidates to kind of reimagine how they can team up and work together and make their tools available in a more integrated way. And anything we can do to help farmers avoid 4 and 5 and 6 trips to different support players and actors, the better. They're ready to do their part, but they're looking for something more integrated and efficient.
Yeah, the other thing that came to mind, maybe because of the proximity there by the Hughes Center, is some of the circuit riders that I think sees and that we have invested in, that are helping local governments, whether there's some other model like that it's like sometimes you need more than the online, just here's all the links in one place. You need something that helps you, because there's so many, and you got to understand, how to match the programs with your specific eligibility. And maybe that's the districts. Maybe
that's why the conversation needs to continue, but we're in the 21st century, not the 20th century. And the ways that farmers receive information and process that and work with partners is much different than when I was in state government 30 years ago. So how do we support them in with the tools and the networks that we have today in a way that delivers better outcomes? So we'll look forward to having that conversation. But we heard that very consistently from farmers, that they're looking for something better than what they have today.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions? All right, well, President Shea and to the Harry Hughes Center folks that are on, thank you, Josh and Nancy. Really appreciate this. Appreciate the continued work. And yeah, please share any information you can with us about the launch, and we'll share back out with this group. But looking forward to it. And again, thank you so much for just such a deep level of work that went into this report.
Great. Well, we look forward to working with you on the implementation side of the roadmap, because this is a journey too. The implementation will not be a one and done. This is a multi-year, probably decades long journey that we'll be on together. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. This is a group that is familiar with multi-year implementation. The perfect segue to our next agenda item. Thank you, everybody in this group who's continued to make progress on the next gen plan, on the priorities and the milestones. And as we keep this kind of front of mind, there were items that were flagged for support from the ARWG and this group at large. So you were sent a table last week that pulled out many of those tasks and suggested deliverables that could be incorporated into future work plans and work that could be done moving forward. And we would like to discuss today, and come to a group consensus about one item specifically that we can move forward in our 2026 work plan. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryland to facilitate this conversation and to walk us through the decision.
I am once again relying on all of you to have done your homework and have taken a look at this table, because I think we just don't ever have enough time in these meetings to truly dig fully into each of these options. But what we did here is I went through and from the work provided to us by Natasha earlier this year, we have a table of who is assigned for each of the tasks in NextGen. And of course, ARWG has its own tab. So what I did is compile some of those tasks into more deliverable centered tasks that we can consider adding to our work plan for next year. I don't have any envision that we will be able to tackle all of them. That is just not possible, but we need to start chipping away and providing our support where we can. So if you all have taken the time to look through this, I want to leave space at the top right away and see if there's any of these tasks that anybody wants to champion or speak to or advocate for a standout option for us to move forward in this group next year. Please let me know.
If you're online, please use the hand raise function in the room. Same thing.
I will do the dreaded walk us through the entire table if we must. So we can start at the top. We have the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion section. There were a lot of large tasks in this section, and so I did my best to pull out at least one that is sort of an achievable milestone for us. We had talked about forming a subgroup of just ARWG devoted to ensuring that we are carrying out the principles of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, both within our own work group and starting to brainstorm how we can make sure that filters into adaptation and resilience across state agencies. One of the things that our team here at DNR also suggested as a potential task is we have state environmental justice strategic plans that are going to be due next summer in 2026. So an option could be for utilizing a subgroup of ARWG devoted to walking through those plans and pulling out some touch points with next gen milestones and perhaps identifying areas that we can improve on. Any comments on this?
I'll jump in. Oh, yes. Yeah, Frederica.
So I think I was actually on one of the Jedi subgroups, and we've talked about this a lot. And I think one of the things that's important is to keep in mind is it's not just the language in one group, it's that it's integrated into all of the recommendations. So I think so you all may have ended up at a different place by that, but I seem to recall in our discussions that the point was that this objective to reach communities that have otherwise not usually had the resources going to them that other communities have benefited from, that is a part of each of the recommendations and that it's like stated clearly. So thanks. Just wanted to bring that up.
Yes, thank you. I should orient everybody to the table as well for context. So you could see where these tasks that I pulled out are coming from. The priority text, as a reminder, is that overarching heading that we want to achieve in the next generation adaptation plan. And the milestone text provides us those step-by-step bullet points for achieving that priority. So I pulled out basically one task under that larger heading of the priority.
Thanks for the clarification. I should have looked at the whole report. Thanks, Riley.
That's okay. Okay, I'm going to move down to the next row then. We had a couple items that were in the local government and state service delivery section. The first one is about providing a toolkit of resources. So similar to kind of what we heard from the Hughes Center, a lot of conversation around providing that one-stop shop where people can go and look for things such as grant opportunities, as well as what tools and opportunities are out there. In that plan, we had identified the Office of Resilience as the leader in this strategy. They could utilize support from ARWG in developing this. I know the Office of Resilience did release last year, or correct me if I'm wrong on that, the version 1 of the Resilience Toolkit, But I think there were some ideas in next gen that would take it further. So any comments on this?
Yep, Summer.
Yeah, I can just jump in real quickly from our side, you know, and then of course want to hear what the commissioners think. But this is on our roadmap, anyways, for the next year to be working on updates to the toolkit. So that's something that that we will be working on. So if that helps with, you know, thinking about the capacity for this group, we will be doing that. So you don't necessarily need to prioritize it, and we can just make sure that we have in our plans capturing the feedback that has already been provided by the ARWG and any future feedback that folks are interested in sharing. So I don't know if that helps, Ryland, but if it's easier to say, like we can kind of take that one and make it less of an effort for ARWG kind of coordination. Just wanted to put that out there.
Great, that sounds reasonable. You guys are steering the ship here, and we will be support players as necessary.
I was wondering if this was something that we might want to tie more tightly to the revised Chesapeake Bay agreement that we approved yesterday. You know, particularly since one of the focuses, like under the Healthy Landscapes goal, is a really similar focus on how do we get this information to places where it's going to influence land use, land planning, ways that are going to be really important for adaptation and resilience.
Yeah.
And whether that's something that, you know, as a group that we could help with this, whether it has to be like the priority of the group. Yeah. I'm sure Laura's got it covered, but I would encourage, you know, like close coordination with the efforts of the Bay program.
Yeah.
To support this kind of thing, because there's like amazing tools.
We shouldn't be creating 5 one-stop shops.
The piece of purpose of the one.
Yeah, so the Chesapeake Bay program already has the watershed data dashboard. They have the healthy watershed assessment. I mean, stuff that took years to develop is served, you know, Baywide, which for Maryland is statewide. So we cover the counties.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's something that I think would be a good addition.
Yeah, good. That was a great practice.
Hopefully we can do.
Yeah.
Comment on this one. I'm glad to see the toolkit on there and glad to hear that the Office of Resilience will be kind of taking that one. I'd love to see ARWG next year talk about what do we do with it. I think a lot of the conversations happening across multiple agencies, across multiple different programs, serving local governments. The state service delivery is, what are we doing with it? How are we providing it? How are we interpreting it for local governments? How are they expressing what they want to do and how they're going to achieve it? I know we've been having a lot of conversations about how do we improve that network? How do we understand what NDP is doing and what DNR is doing, and how do we work more effectively together? So I think that'd be really nice to think of.
Yeah, and the suggestion we had, they worked for me this morning was, could we have office hours where local governments could like bring their actual problems, the things that they really want solutions to. We may not be able to answer them, but we may be able to like really match, like what is the data that we have? How can we provide that specialized technical expertise in ways that do help them move towards what they want to do with their jurisdiction? And then have those kind of office hour examples of questions and the work that might follow that end up in, you know, some sort of workshop or something there.
At the risk of speaking outside of my agency, I know the Office of Resilience has talked about wanting to do a lot of that local outreach and bring in state partners around that exact topic, you know, how to like bring your problems to us and let's talk to you about those specifically. So I feel like that is great alignment.
It also, we were just, for some of you, we had CoSmart earlier today. The conversation was also there is about how do we reach and plug into local governments in that same respect, which has obviously a resilience component as well. So, I like that idea too, kind of like how do we figure out where there's kind of interconnectivity between our agencies with the goal of that being communicated to local government so that they can be plugged in and kind of do multiple intervention points at the same time, if you will. It's almost like a way for us to be more just efficient with communications too, as the strategic plan for resilience comes out. It's very different than this one, but it's also, I don't know, there's something in here that I feel like is maybe maximally impactful for this group.
Well, I think that if I'm recalling correctly, I haven't memorized all the priorities in next gen, sorry guys, but there are other themes in that local government and state service delivery section that echo this sentiment. It's not maybe this specific toolkit based one, but it's in next gen. It's just, not necessarily this priority. So worthy work, but let's figure out those touch points.
The next goal that talks about the outreach campaign. And one of the items in there, it talks about focusing messages on the cost of inaction. While that's necessary, it would seem to me that the more positive, and I think that's what's been talking about here, is the values of action. What has been saved. And I'm thinking of the example of Chrisfield's grant suddenly getting canceled by FEMA. Well, that wasn't inaction. They worked very hard to get that grant and it's pulled out. But are there positive examples to put forward to say, here's what this local community did, and this is the extrapolation of the value that we see from it? I think that's a more powerful message, quite frankly, than saying, you're really gonna regret not moving because all of these things could happen, instead of using the positive examples of where some adaptation or resilience action was taken. Anyway, just in terms of the messaging, I like what other people are suggesting in terms of these workshops, working through on specific solutions. I think that's where people are looking for help, not just a generalized toolkit that's useful, but it's only the beginning of solutions.
So would you see that maybe as we work to identify a suite of projects across the state that have resulted in increasing resilience for the surrounding communities, natural communities, et cetera, and then we build a communication tool around that positive story, but it allows folks to think about, like local governments especially, and landowners, how they would implement a project similarly there.
Yeah, and if there are metrics that demonstrate some specific value, whether that's economic, whether that's acres that are saved from saltwater intrusion, include those metrics so they become very tangible. Oh, I see the value of that type of action. But I think that would be helpful for the local governments to see.
Yeah, I think the way that this one was written was like that educational outreach campaign, but I think I like your tweak a little bit better. It's not, it's a carrot and a stick, right? But the carrot is obviously a lot better if we can emphasize that and make people want to do it on their own.
Well, I think that there's a point online here about not being redundant with listening sessions and reach out and outreach. That I think is important too for this conversation. And I think kind of going that project lens allows us to stay away from that because we can focus it on specific projects that we're telling the not just telling a story around, but deep diving and getting into why they were successful and how they could be replicable.
I also want to say the way this one was written really centered around working with the education, communication, and outreach, which is the ECO acronym up there, which is one of the other working groups under the Commission on Climate Change. We don't have to tie ourselves to that. I know, like all of us, they are also at capacity a lot of the time, and their work more directly supports the work of the commission itself. So again, emphasizing we have the freedom to sort of tweak or adapt any of these pieces of next gen. We don't have to follow them word for word. We can make this what is most useful to the group. Move along. So the next three, I believe, are from the Climate Jobs and Training, which is another one of our three focus groups that have those overarching goals. There's a couple of good actionable items from these groups. The first of which is compiling an inventory of existing education and training programs that are already in existence. And this would then help us identify gaps and opportunities for program expansion. And I think personally, this is a great first step for some of the other things that we've talked about in building our climate ready workforce, is assessing what do we already have, which I don't think that already exists. I think that's work that our group is probably fully capable of representing each of their agencies and figuring out what's around. I think I would still advocate for a formation of at least a temporary subgroup around this topic, just to get everybody's involvement. And so I don't end up being the only one doing the work here. I know you guys are more than willing to help. And then compiling that inventory, I also think is a very achievable goal in next year's work plan potential. So we'll open it up to the room.
I think this is pretty foundational for the, you know, and the jobs aspect of adaptation is huge. Anything that we can do to contribute to that, you know, with some of these other lenses that we're talking about, you know, JEDI or DEIJ, it's a good springboard, and we're glad to contribute to that.
Hands on the subject.
I might throw something out here, Rylan, that it kind of taking that idea of like a couple really important or very good projects that have happened across the resilience space. We could, because right, we're going to look at what are the tools that are important? How do we communicate it? How do they build jobs? And then just kind of continuing to go down the list, right? And then what funding sources were important? How does it impact critical infrastructure? We could actually kind of use all of these as lenses and look at 4 projects and say, okay, for this project, it impacted critical infrastructure in a major way. It was a novel way to increase employment. There was a training component. Like we could almost use these as lenses and do case studies, specific case studies, and overlay these as like, these are the things we're looking for in case studies that builds linkages across these specific areas.
Pull out the components that exist.
And it could bring visibility to the funding sources, which, you know, everything's going to be on the table to cut. Like for us, having the Woodland Incentive Fund there is huge for our job training efforts. With scholarly workforce development.
I think a lot of times we struggle with all these topics because there's not as much tangible. So I think if we focus it in on projects, we're actually starting with tangible and backing it out.
Interesting.
So I don't know, still going to think about it.
Maybe it's time for the next one, which again is also climate jobs and training. So this is more geared in the priority under early career training. So this is more of the K-12 lens. And this is around curriculum examples, which I know can be a hotbed topic for our education people. So I just wanted to flag that as something that might need to potentially be swung in a different direction or more of a discussion with partners of ours about what's actually going to be useful. But the Environmental Literacy Advisory Network is still an existing resource that we can tap into and cross-pollinate with to, again, focus on those job opportunities. How do we get that filtered into some of our K-12 education? How do we build that into stuff that's already in the schools? So maybe a bit more of a challenge, but a worthy topic to discuss.
We've had fun with the Junior Achievement Center in Salisbury, and that does K through 12 and different career paths at different stages. So it's not like tons of environmental literacy, but just awareness of hey, there's green jobs out there.
That's great.
But there's, you know, that's just
Yeah.
one.
Sure. But a good example.
And 10,000 students from the shore
Mhm.
every year.
Frederica?
Thanks. I just wanted to, again, so much of this and people have talked about it. So it's really reiterating this idea that making sure that the ARWG and all the other groups that are all focusing that on this issue, importantly, this issue being like adapting to climate change, that there's a coordination. And so I look at this literacy thing, and I think DNR actually is co-chairing the committee that the governor has put together to, and they've just come up with draft recommendations for environmental literacy. There's a lot of work being done at the career and technical education level on trying to look at curriculum in Maryland for environmental literacy. There's the University System of Maryland's focus on how to connect the university with K through 12 environmental and climate literacy. And it's good to call out Milan here too. They're in part of the mix, but just sort of reiterating that there's a lot of pieces going together. And it's just, I know it takes time and capacity to try and pull all of these different entities together so that we can move forward in a coherent fashion, which is what I think we all want to do. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for flagging that, Frederica, because I actually had a conversation with my colleague who helps support the Outdoor Learning Partnership, which I believe you're referencing in terms of they just released their recommendations. And that reminded me, she actually sent me a copy of the recommendation that really crosswalks with this around environmental literacy. And the specific text is develop a new career in technology education in environmental management, sustainability, and technology pathways. So they also support, you know, how do we build in career and technology education around, you know, this climate through line in, you know, that arena. So it's nice to see, you know, we can be in lockstep and we can combine our resources maybe towards this goal.
Thank you. Yeah, that was it, OLP. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm new to the conservation education space, but we're working with them now. We've started having several conversations about the sustainability pathway related to the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, and how we could start integrating particularly nature-based solutions for restoration into some of that K-12 education, as well as potentially our community partners network. So I'm still learning all the lingo, but we have started an effort to look not only at K-12, but also early career exposure to some of these climate jobs. Because by the time you get a few years into those careers, you kind of already set your pathway. And if you're not exposed to working on shoreline projects or stormwater projects, you may not take that career pathway. So we're starting to look at some.
I think that's a great tie into sort of the next one, which is actually under the same priority as the one we just discussed. But that tags more collaboration with the Department of Service and Civic Innovation and the Department of Labor to put more thought and time into developing maybe the climate adaptation resilience training into the service year program, and also potentially expanding those youth apprenticeship programs that already are in existence, which again is something that I feel like a small subgroup of ARWG members could help really dig in on some of these subjects. Even though we do not have labor or DSCI represented, I should say. But I know Catherine has spoken with them when we were in development, so I don't know if you can speak to their.
Yeah, I think it is critical to kind of pull labor back in. At least on some of the nature-based shoreline work, we've connected back with the Marine Contractors Licensing Board, Department of Labor about their apprenticeship programs. They had a webinar a couple of weeks ago about how to build out some of those apprenticeship standards for different industries. So some staff in WCS are starting to incorporate that into the work plan for workforce development.
We also have the build out of the apprenticeship program, the Office of Outdoor Rec, and there is some pathways related to how we manage public land for adaptation. So I think there's a lot of overlap in those spaces too, where the apprenticeship programs are a really good opportunity for that. I am cognizant though that we don't have DSCI and labor on ARWG, so I don't know if we should be making a decision that would heavily impact their capacity without them in the room for the discussion.
Is there an opportunity maybe to tie some of this into for example, the report we just heard on climate smart agriculture? That would seem to be a great entry point for educational input. Thinking less of green jobs and more of the green tinge to existing jobs. You know, how do you move towards greener as opposed to putting jobs necessarily in a separate category? To me, that's the win, is getting everyone in their thinking of how they approach a particular task or output or product output. How does this become greener? And I think that's where this effort could really be helpful.
I was going to say, I know when we did the framework in Next Gen, both labor and commerce and DSCI identify kind of their slices of where the adaptation and jobs overlap. So it might be something, if the group's interested, we could do kind of a mini session like agriculture just did, to kind of highlight how they defined it and what their role would potentially be.
All right, for the sake of time, I'm just going to move us forward. So I know our group has discussed this before. I think last time we discussed it, we were in a very different administration climate, I will say. So the interagency funding coordination was developed basically around the idea that federal funding wasn't going to last forever. And here we are. So I want to put it back on the table though, because I think interagency funding coordination is still a large topic that we want to be better at. I think the ARWG could be a platform for it. I want to put it out there for discussion because the context around this recommendation has, I think, changed a little bit since it's written. Any thoughts on that? I think some of the comments we got when the Next Gen plan first came out about this are that there are existing groups already that coordinate, like the Governor's Office. Go fit.
So the PIT team, the federal investment team.
Yes, I don't know where that still stands, but just wanted to flag that also for the group.
They're tracking all the funds for this thing. No, that was a bit of a poor answer. No, I think I think there's also an interesting question here in terms of where the private fund sources lie, right? Which I think is, which is maybe now a larger opportunity to building really robust like brick applications, similar to unfortunately the one that we saw Crystal lose. So we've had some of those conversations.
So that's what financing would be like, because some of these things are related to local government functions in stormwater and sewer and things that do have a repayment stream, potential for a repayment stream. So I know I don't have financing expertise, and there may be ways that we could be considering solutions that more broadly.
Yeah, I think it was developed around more innovative mechanisms like loans and stuff. Like, how can we sort of utilize some of these other levers that are out there?
And some of the other things that people are doing, like voluntary markets and stuff like that. That's they're complicated in ways that we're not always expert at. So, the question is, what is ARW?
Yeah,
contribute. So, I guess it's maybe being a convener, expand the learning around different financing tools, because this is when you look at like what's the biggest jurisdictions ask and stuff, a lot of it's around water resources, it's around flooding, it's around and those are in-your-face kind of adaptation needs for the local problems. So anything that we can do and what you know, and what you know is well aware of, it really matters.
Yeah, Natalie.
Yeah, I think over, you know, in the coming years, I think the commission in general needs to kind of think about this funding piece at a larger scale, because we have voluntary markets, we have money that's going in, and it's mainly going to mitigation. And, you know, obviously we need to address the source of the issue, but at some point we need to understand the priorities of balancing funding coming in for mitigation and funding coming in for adaptation and resilience. So I think that's a larger conversation too, that we need to pull up to the commission level.
That's a good point. Yep.
Natalie, what kind of, do you think there's a good partnership there between the mitigation and the adaptation resilience?
I'm sorry, did you say that again?
Is there a good partnership between, you know, the mitigation working group might be working on and what we might be looking to achieve in adaptation and resilience?
Oh yeah, I definitely think there are. Yeah, and I definitely think there's ways to marry those things together for sure. And other, you know, other states have used the voluntary market monies differently than Maryland is right now, in a more balanced way. So there's other, you know, examples out there too.
This is definitely something we can pitch at like the next steering committee meeting for the full commission if we think, I mean, I think funding has been a topic for a while.
I almost would be interested to get outside the context of the United States, because you look at kind of what we see from other funding opportunities in other countries that have done like national scale blue bonds and things like that. I think that there's a lot more innovative going on, especially in the financing space around adaptation resilience on the global space and globally than there necessarily is in the US. So I think that's I know enough to be dangerous, but that could be anything. But I do think that would be an interesting set of presentations to get as well. And probably Bob. They could probably we've gotten briefings, sorry, not to interrupt, but we've gotten briefings on blue bonds in the Netherlands, in Israel, a few different Caribbean countries. Obviously, the TNC did the Seychelles debt work. There's a lot that's gone on across the globe that I think is, but it's also, there are much different regulatory climates, right? Much different insurance kind of programs on the global market that we have here in the US. So I think, as interesting, I'm now going to contradict myself, but I do think there's a lot to learn there, and we just need to make sure we keep it within the parameters of what we could achieve here, because there are some things that I just think are way down, like parametric insurance, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky stuff, and it's hard to find the right fit, which is why working on a local stage is very handy, because you can find the handful of places where it works, but it's hard to be like, and now put it here, and have those opportunities work. So I think that's still that's like the next challenge of figuring out that private financing side of things.
For the sake of time, I'm going to move us forward. It's great discussion. This is our last item in the table, in this critical infrastructure section. There was a piece that specifically asked the ARWD in a support capacity to develop definition guidance for the evaluation of critical infrastructure types, and which interested and impacted parties should be using this approach. So that's kind of the whole sector kind of relies on, you know, developing a definition of what is critical infrastructure, and then from there, everything else is, you know, stepwise. So this is kind of a critical first step to help this whole section move forward. I again propose that this would benefit from the formation of at least a temporary subgroup to support the work. Poor Allison can't lead this all on her own on ARWG's behalf. But I also wanted to put this out to the group, and hear where we are in this sector, if this is even something, achievable at the agencies right now.
Yeah, I think for this, we have some of this critical infrastructure resiliency work on our docket, as I'm sure many other agencies do, and we're obviously work closely with MDM on like the strategy when it comes out. And so I think forming a subgroup, obviously it's not just me in a room by myself, it's something that I can and is timely, I think, to happen in 2026. So I'm happy to say that I will do that and I will lead that. I will be interested to see for people who join and even perspectives from people who maybe don't have the capacity for the subgroup. But when these recommendations were developed, it was, I believe this originally came from like the adaptation framework like years ago. So this was pre-Office of Resilience. And so I think the first task for this subgroup would be to really look at what the recommendation is and then develop the definition and like, what does it actually mean to establish the definition? Because the state resilience strategy now has a definition for critical infrastructure. And maybe it's less of a definition and more of just kind of clarifying guidance on like what we mean when we say critical infrastructure for these different entities. So that's a very long-winded way to say that I'm willing to step up and do a subgroup in 2026. It just might, the deliverable might just not be exactly in line with this language, because I think that there's been so much that's changed in the landscape around this in the last couple of years that we will want to reevaluate if it's still the most relevant endpoint for that first step. That you can just put that right in there. But also other people have volunteered because I can't just sit there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most of these are fully dependent on getting some level of participation from the group. We're not making any progress if it's just one person. So, and it doesn't have to be you guys. It could be you tapping into other staff at your agency that might have a little more, whatever that means for all of these. So the last thing that I want to do is have you all get out your phones so that we can actually get some sort of consensus on this. And I have a little Mentimeter for you. It's a 1-question Mentimeter, and it is going to ask you to just rank all of these that we have heard here. Get even bigger. So for those of you who are aware, for QR code, you just pull out your phone camera option, aim it at the little square, and click the link that it should pop up. Otherwise, you can use your computer, go to menti.com, and type in the numbers that you see there on the screen. So I'm giving everybody just a minute. Sign on. A few people are in here. And don't worry, guys, it's just one question. And here it is. So again, this is asking you to rank them, not just pick one option. I thought that might be the most fair. I should add a note that I did use shorthand to describe each of these things. If anyone is confused about what they are referring to, please let me know.
And I'm seeing a comment from Jeff Silva that he did submit public comment in writing. So
Okay.
we'll just want to note that for the public comment record.
Yes.
And thank you, Mr. Silva.
Too small. Few results.
That's what I would do, so like, I can't read that.
I also don't really know how to make it calculations, but I trust my.
Yes, that makes me want to rest this other.
You could read that.
Yeah, I can see their
I'm hearing, may or may not be mobile friendly for large options. All right, I see we maybe have a couple people still waiting to put in results, so give it. Tell me one more person.
First.
Those Maryland Office of Resilience. That they said they could already do it without her.
Apparently that's the topic.
Well, it is an important option. Two are the ones that people said there's capacity behind. Like the first one is Eminem said it, and the second one's I said it.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's where the organization's coming in. That's what helps. Yeah, right.
All right, thank you all for voting. And that concludes the next gen specific portion of our work plan, but we are going to transition this now into the actual work plan discussion, which once again, I am hoping you read your homework that I sent out the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So everyone definitely read it.
I just requested access.
And didn't read it. That's okay. There are copies up there if you want to read the physical version. Let me load it up on my screen. So the first item on the work plan is next gen tracking. That's pretty much going to be an action item or like a standing action item, keep us accountable to next gen. And we have talked about this already at ARWG meetings that we are in the development of that public tracker. So this probably should not be a surprise to anyone to hear this, that will continue to be at the forefront of our work. So the next thing I wanted to provide the group a little update on is the climate and health profile report update. This was, as you remember, a recommendation that actually moved forward into the commission's annual report this past fall. That report's going to be published this week, I believe, or next week. So it'll be live. That report should be updated. So to facilitate this work moving forward, the ARWG has already begun helping to convene meetings of the appropriate parties to get this work initiated. We have a lot of good support from the Department of the Environment and the Department of Transportation, as well as the Department of Health, of course, who is kind of spearheading this campaign. We also have support from the Scientific and Technical Working Group in the form of Dave Namazi from the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, and also Robin Gilden, who represents the University of Maryland School of Public Health. Both of them are going to be serving also on this steering committee, I'll call it for lack of a decided name, that will be kind of initiating the work and then guiding its formation. So those meetings have kicked off. They're aiming potentially for early next year to have a convening where we bring our university partners to the table and see who has the appetite to contribute to this update. The ask is really not going to be for the creation of new data, new analyses. It's going to be more about what do we already have that's updated that should go into this report. And the piece that we've been talking about pretty much this whole meeting, how do we make it clear how that data is usable for our local government context? So providing case studies and examples on the application of the data is going to be a key component as well. So if anybody in the ARWG would like to be involved in that update, I invite you all to send me an email if you're not sure, but if you'd like to be tapped in, I'm more than happy to welcome you in. And this group will be updated as possible when work begins to progress. So I just wanted that to be at the forefront of our work plan because it was our recommendation from last week. And it's moving forward. Any questions on that or comments? I should also have the context the Scientific and Technical Working Group is supporting because they had another recommendation about updating a similar scientific report that would contain information released in this report. So they're helping to build towards their own goal. So another part of the work plan for next year that came up during our recommendations discussion is what we are titling Strategies for Resilient Coastal Living. This is a broader conversation about hearing from other states about different strategies that we have for dealing with living in coastal zones. And this could contain a lot of different strategies, including buyouts, but also elevating homes, floodproofing, and community-driven relocation. So this is not going to necessarily say Maryland should do X, Y, Z, but it is a conversation about what is out there and what has worked and what has not worked. We have envisioned that as again, inviting other people to talk about their experiences and inviting people in Maryland that would benefit from hearing that information. Any comments on this item? Yeah. Go ahead.
Kate's very excited.
Oh.
Yes, Commissioner Leslie Mizrahi.
I see this as extremely important, and thank you for proposing it.
Thank you.
I should back myself up for a second. This is the draft work plan. And so when I'm proposing these ideas to you today, they are very much editable and in flux. So if you have changes you want to see to something simple, even just the wording, especially around something that could potentially be a hot button topic, please let me know. I'm happy to make edits to this. Or if you would like the deliverable to change, if you'd like to see something different. This is a draft format, which we'll then go over and finalize in our February meeting to make sure we're all on the same page. So this is a conversation, less of a presentation, making sure you're all on board.
So given that is the case, I'm wondering if we could add costs, that we want to hear what they're doing and how much it costs.
Okay.
I think that's an important addition.
Wondering about tribal engagement. Just be, I don't know, specific examples of your perspective from adaptation.
If there are examples that you think would be beneficial for us to consider to invite to this conversation, we'd love to hear your suggestions. We've had a couple names thrown around already, such as the Blue Acres program in New Jersey, but also Louisiana. I think they do have some tribal engagement work that they have done out there. I know Natalie's the expert on here, but any other examples that you would like to see added to the conversation, please feel free to contact me with that. Okay, and then we have this supporting local governments, which was actually a carryover item from this year's work plan that we didn't quite get to. So I didn't want to get it lost in the shuffle just because it didn't make it on any of our meeting agendas. This is, again, very similar to some of the conversation we've been having today. How do we better support our local governments in a lot of different capacities? So again, the deliverable is open to interpretation as written. I believe this is the same as it was last year, with devoting a future meeting time to discuss barriers to local governments and best practices for increasing tool and data usability in resilience planning, and will document actions that agencies have taken to achieve these priorities. If we think that something we've discussed today is maybe a better deliverable than that, we're very open to changing it, having some sort of product or recommendation coming out of it for the commission, I think would be a good end goal. And then, of course, additional to the work plan, we'll be adding what we have voted on today for the next gen work. So that's a missing piece that you don't see yet. Overall, I think we have a lot of tasks ahead of us.
So wondered about the interaction between the discussions that we just had, like, you know, the strong interest in the resilience toolkit that obviously relates to, it looks like 3 and 4. Just trying to figure out whether that's a piece of what we're delivering there.
Yeah.
Yep, Commissioner Lasso, sorry.
Yes, thank you. There's a lot of energy around creating plans and sharing resources. And I'm wondering, because so many people are now searching for answers in ChatGPT and other mechanisms, if there's any incentive or initiative to educate the search engines from the AI companies so that when they put out answers to such questions, that they're putting out factual, helpful content.
That's a good point. Yeah,
I don't know enough about
Yeah, I
it to know how we will work on it.
I mean, it's gotta be involved in the toolkit build out, right? Because that's
Yeah.
it's how we would get people to access that toolkit. And I think AI will become a driver for how people access things like that in the future.
Mhm.
I think we should capture that in the toolkit discussion for how we could tag the tools to ensure that people are seeing them.
Yeah.
Perhaps there could even be an initiative to reach out to some of the AI companies to ensure that their content is factual, because so many people are now starting to rely on them. But I don't know if there's anyone working to actually actively reach out to some of these AI companies that are responsible for so much groupthink out there. And frankly, so much climate disinformation, as we saw from COP, where they actually did a special report on the disinformation coming out.
Yeah, and I will follow up with with the Department of Information Technology. So they've done a lot of work with AI tools and ensuring that the accuracy of those for use for state government. So I can do some follow up and do it and find out if there's some folks there that we can bring in to have a conversation with us about that.
Thank you.
And I apologize because I just now realized I wasn't sharing the work plan with you visually. So hopefully everyone has access in their emails and was following along. The second half of the work plan, I really slashed from last year. It is the ongoing work section where we kind of went back and forth on what that section's for. I think it's still useful to keep on, but I really wanted to narrow the scope of that to new or very relevant ongoing work that the ARWG does not have a lead role in, but is like keeping on our collective radar. And so of course that is the Office of Resilience, which thank you, Summer, for providing an update for that paragraph, but then also the presentation that we heard today, that Hughes Center Climate and Agriculture Report, supporting that work, I think should be a key part of something we are all keeping in mind day to day. And then also the work that Maryland is doing with the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. That's a lot of money that came into the state. It does have some ties to adaptation and resilience. And one of the facets from our group is actually coming into the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant in terms of the community liaison work that was written in there. So I think it'll be good to keep those initiatives on the radar for everyone in the group. I also would love to hear if there are other key recent initiatives that anyone would like to add to this. That's in red at the bottom, room for other initiatives. You can support by sending me an email with a little blurb write up about it, and we can put it on our work plan for next year to keep tabs. Yes.
We have a Inflation Reduction Act, U.S. Forest Service Forest Stewardship Award that's around resiliency. So, I mean, it's a lot of our favorite forest practices, and it's enhanced cost share for landowners. So, and that's something that we're, trying to have work well with the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant and a landscape scale restoration grant that we are framing around dynamic forest restoration blocks.
Okay.
So
I'll thank you for that. For someone in your group.
Yeah, Dan Ryder is the program manager who's and just had the kickoff this month or so, and are getting involved.
Yep, Frederica.
Just wonder, one other thought, which is probably too off the wall. But there's this discussion now of natural capital. And it might be interesting in this group to link conservation and, you know, management of carbon sequestration ecosystems as a form of natural capital, as a positive, as opposed to, you know, in competition and in value with extraction, right? So that's been the balance. We use natural resources and value them for extraction. There's a lot of conversation now in the state and elsewhere about conservation and restoration and valuation. And I'm just wondering if it might be helpful for this whole group, if part of our work plan or discussion next year might have a discussion about that. And maybe that ties into the financing. Maybe it's a way for mitigation and adaptation groups to come together on a topic. So, and you know, if this is so off the wall, that's fine. I just thought I'd throw it out there. Thank you for your.
Thank you, Frederica. And I think, you know, also always open to more suggestions over email. If you have time to doodle on this in the next, you know, several weeks, or taking time off with your family, something pops in your mind. We are open to all suggestions for us.
Like reading over the holidays.
Yeah, it's like reading over the holidays. Yes, yes. And Commissioner Lasso was right.
I just put in the chat the link to the UN report on the disinformation and how critical it is on our issues. And just wanted to reiterate that Secretary Kurtz, I'm so pleased you'll reach out to the information teams, but I would love to see it as an actual initiative that we work through for the future to reach out aggressively to the AI companies to ensure factual information.
Absolutely. And I will include that link in the meeting report or meeting minutes. And thank you, Elliot. Elliot Campbell dropped a link in there as well in the chat on natural capital accounts.
Any other comments on the work plan? Well, shall we head to the last section?
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much, Rylan. Okay, we're going to move now to public comments. If you remember the public, and you're online, please use the raise hand function and we will call on you for public comment. And we will scroll back up to Jeff Silver's comment as well.
You got that?
I cannot read the next item. My eyes are not.
Here, I will copy that.
Okay. Probably just read it.
Yes, why don't I just do that?
Yeah, thank you.
Problem with Hughes Center for agroecology slideshow. No losses quantified. How much money did Maryland Ag lose to wet environment, increased blights, rots, disease spread from the last 4 years as compared to a 4-year period starting in 2000? How much money did Maryland Ag lose to wet environment, increased erosion and runoff from the last 4 years as compared to a 4-year period starting in 2000? How much money did Maryland Ag lose to droughts from the last 4 years as compared to a 4-year period starting in 2000? How much ag harvest was lost to saltwater intrusion in 2024 as compared to 2000? How much has Maryland crop insurance increased from 2000 as compared to 2024's insurance premiums? No points of relevance were provided to the non-agriculture audience.
And we can check with, I'm not sure if that's going to be in the report. I think their slides didn't cover it, but it was pretty high level. So we'll check and see what the reports are, assuming that there will be coverage of loss to some extent in there so we can understand the scale of the issue. So we can follow up on that. Seeing no hands online, members of the public in the room, there are none. All right, so we have our proposed dates for next year. We're planning to do the same format as this year, final Wednesday final Wednesday of the month and quarterly. So February 25th, May 27th, August 26th, and November 18th. November 18th is not the last Wednesday, but it is the last Wednesday before the Thanksgiving holiday. Not right before the Thanksgiving holiday, but the week before that. So we're gonna go with that for better participation. It'll still be 2 to 4 p.m. So thank you all very much. I hope you enjoy your holiday season, and we will look forward to seeing you all February 25th at 2 o'clock. So thank you. Hopefully the room is slightly warmer. Have a good one.